Hello everyone, and welcome to this important episode of Kelly's Quest. I am here today with Representative Gerri Cannon from the New Hampshire State House of Representatives, and she has made the trip down just to talk about some bills that are moving their way through the New Hampshire House of Representatives and the Senate, and just to kind of give us as an audience an overview of what's happening with trans rights in New Hampshire. And it seems like there's this burden that is now being placed on trans youth and non-binary youth to conform to a state of being that isn't who they are. And I know that states like Tennessee, states like Florida, Texas are really pushing this concept of parents' rights are more important than trans rights. And it seems to be something that they have been able to latch onto that is giving them headway. And what my goal is today is to talk about what is going on in New Hampshire. Are they making headway in New Hampshire using these different strategies? And what can I do to make sure that as a transgender person in Massachusetts that we keep New England safe? But thank you so much for being here, and I know that's a lot to unpack, but you're the person to help me do it, Gerri.
Now, it is a complex topic. Parental rights has been a big thing in the State House, but it's also been a big thing locally in our community. I sat on the school board in Somersworth, New Hampshire.
Okay.
I want to let you know, I'm a state representative, one of 400 representatives in New Hampshire, and there's 4 representatives for my particular district, and I'm in District 12 within the county of Stratford.
Okay.
And I represent the small city of Somersworth and the small town of Rollinsford, which is an interesting challenge because there are 2 different forms of government within the town and the city.
Okay.
But people are people, and they all have needs. And the school systems essentially run the same as well. You have a school board that sits at a level over the administration of the school, and then there's the teachers that teach. And, so that's, in some ways, that's where the start of government is in the local communities.
Okay.
And what we ran into this past couple of years while I was on the school board is we had to work on policies, especially for transgender kids. And the challenge has been, it's been morphing. It's about the best thing. There was no formal guidelines given to us to work with transgender students in school. So we've had to create the policy based on policies that came to us from the transgender community and from GLSEN, and put some of that information together to create a policy. But then we also had to listen to the students and the parents and the administration as far as what did they need to make it a safe place for kids. And so in the case of the Somersworth School, they were very flexible. Our mayor is a gay man, and he was also the middle school principal.
Okay.
So things were very flexible. There were some challenges we ran into, though. Yeah, they could accept kids that were trans, but some of the things, like a child wanted to be called by their preferred gender name.
Right.
The problem is if that teacher calls that child by that preferred name in front of a parent and the parent doesn't know that, they look at the teacher and say, are we talking about the same kid? And then it gets into an interesting discussion for some of them because they may not have a clue that their child is identifying as transgender in school. And that's where some of the legal issues come into play.
So as a civics lesson for me,
right.
There's a committee, I'm assuming, that was put together to help create these guidelines that you're talking about?
Yes.
And where then people came to you all and sat down and said, here's what we think this guideline should look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then your committee worked through all of that.
Yeah, we're a subcommittee of the school board,
Okay.
just focused on policies.
Okay.
So we work on all the different policies that go on in school and how the school operates. But this was a specific policy just for support of transgender students in school. And part of it was to put some form of structure around what do we do to support the transgender kids. Ultimately, we ended up with a policy that said if a student has the support of their parents as a transgender student and is getting care in their transition process, that they can be the gender they identify as in school with all the rights associated with that gender.
Okay.
So a transgender girl can be with other girls in all aspects of being a girl. Same restroom, same locker rooms, sports, all of that within the school. Same thing with a trans boy, would have all of the rights to be able to use all the same facilities as the other boys in the school. The challenge was for students that weren't out to their parents, to their families, as they sort of get left in the outside that group.
And I can tell you, as a teacher, that does happen. As a teacher, we need guidelines for, so I really do appreciate the fact that transgender people have been around for eternity. As long as there's been human beings, we've been around. We're just now trying to figure out ways to say, come to us, be a part of our society, help, be the kid you need to be. And the teachers want these guidelines. They do. And so I appreciate the hard work that must have been. And this whole thing with parental rights, that's a challenge because they are their parents. I 100% understand communicating with parents as an educator.
Part of the challenge was to let the kids know that if they really want to be integrated with the school as the gender they want to, it puts a little pressure on them to come out to their parents. That may be good for some, but then there's some parents that they go off the deep end, and as I've seen them, that's thrown kids out of their house for being gay. Being transgender is a whole nother thing. So to find support for those children is a big deal. And what I've been trying to get people to focus in on is we need to make sure that the support staff in the school, the counselors, are available, that are knowledgeable on how to work with these children, how to make some recommendations on how they can integrate with the school community, and yet be aware that at home they may end up with some issues. And I can remember even back in the 60s knowing that I was different. I didn't have a name for it back then, but I know that I didn't want to show my feminine side to my parents. I had to man up, so to speak.
You had to put on a facade that was not you.
It was a facade, yeah. In fact, later in life, I had to tell my mom. She asked me, well, what made you decide to be this way? And I looked at her and said, Mom, I didn't decide to be this way. I had to decide to be the other to please everybody else.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
And she grasped that. And I said, I tried as hard as I could, which is one of the reasons it's one of those big stressors for children in school, just children in general, is there's a stress going on. How do they be their real self? And some kids don't make it through that. That's why we have high rates of suicide. So, and that's a tough thing. Yeah.
It's a very tough thing. Once the school board put all of this together and y'all came up, the subcommittee came up with the guideline, what happened next?
So the policy was published and it was brought to the full board for a vote.
Okay.
So we voted it. We voted it in place. And the fascinating part for me as the transgender member on the school board committee is I got hell from other transgender people that I didn't stand up for the other trans kids that were in the school. And I had to look at them and said, I know we need to support those children as well, but we have some legal issues, and we don't have that support at the next level, which is the state. And we don't have the support from society yet, and that's a bigger challenge. And I said that at the end of the evening. We get our comments as board members, and I told people, I said, we put together a good policy so that transgender kids in transition that have support of their families are going to get it. It's going to be a really good environment for them. It's not necessarily the best environment for the kids that aren't out yet, but that's where we need to provide other services in school to recognize that they need someone to embrace who they are. But it's going to be incomplete for a while. It was a month later that I actually stepped off the school board because I was so frustrated that I couldn't make that change and or institute those changes and support those children. But it was just frustrating for me. But it was also frustrating that there were trans people in the community that were not happy with me, and I understood that too. But I had to do what was legal for the community.
I mean, it is tough because people are scared to death in our community, and they want instant safety. Everybody wants to feel safe, and sometimes they don't it's hard for people to understand in our community sometimes that this is a long process. It's been taking place for a long time. Like, this isn't, the political movement is not happening today for the first time for the trans community. This has been going on forever so that we can just get to this point right now.
And that's a good point, and that will lead me to the next level of things. I've been fighting for transgender rights in New Hampshire since 2009. So that was 14 years ago. And I was fighting for transgender equality as a member of the public, as a member of the community. You can get involved with the legislation, creation of laws, and work with representatives or senators or to draft legislation to help the people in the community. And this is what happened for me back in 2009. I'd had a problem where I was laid off from my job, and I didn't have any recourse. There was no support for transgender people at that time. And one of the representatives in Concord asked me to come up and share my story with other representatives while they introduced a bill for transgender rights for equality back in 2009. I got the opportunity to talk with a lot of our state representatives and senators and actually introduce them to a transgender person because they hadn't met anyone. The transgender community in 2009 was not visible. It was extremely hidden.
We were not.
And those of us that were in the community knew that there were quite a few people, but no one was active as far as government it went. And so to be in Concord talking with legislators was a big deal. And I was glad that I had good speaking abilities from my past years in the computer industry. And I had done a lot of consulting, a lot of talking with people, so to be able to sit down and talk with people was great because I could share my story and the challenges I felt. I ended up giving an education to almost half of the electorate, which was helpful because that year we came very close to getting transgender rights passed. It got passed in the House by one vote, and then it got sent to the Senate, the two houses within our form of government.
Okay, can we do a quick civics lesson? Can you kind of explain how New Hampshire's System of government.
System of government.
Works real
Okay.
quick, if you can.
Well, we mentioned there's the school board, and then we have either a city council or the board of selectmen locally. And then we elect representatives who cover a small area. And then we elect senators, which cover a larger area. And the House and the Senate make up the two large bodies within our form of government. And then in New Hampshire, we have this other little 5-person group called an executive council, who then reports into the governor. So here in Massachusetts, you don't have an executive council, but in New Hampshire, we do. And the two houses are where laws come into or are created. So as a representative, I'll take input from my constituents in my communities. They say, we need a law to do this. And I say, okay, I'll take that idea to Concord, and I'll give it to the lawyers. We have a legislative services office that have the lawyers. I don't have to be a lawyer. I just have to bring in the ideas and tell them this is what I want it to do. And they'll write up all the legalese that goes into it, how it affects existing laws and all of that. So that's great. And then we bring those, once that's been worked on, we bring it to our committees. And in the House and in the Senate, we have similar committees. Like I sit on the Health and Human Services Committee. Okay. And there's 20 members of our House. In New Hampshire, we have 400 representatives.
Is that a large number per se for other states, or do you know that?
Yeah, we're the third largest form of state government in the world, in the English-speaking world. It's like, yes, we are. But one of the smallest states in the country, we have the largest delegation of representatives and
that's going to be a fascinating history lesson for me to check out to see how that happened.
Well, it's modeled after the U.S. Constitution as well, because that body is actually larger than 400 as well. So there's a lot of similarities. But each member of the House and each member of the Senate can bring these ideas in to be discussed in committees. So in my case, where I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee, anything to do with a health issue will come in through there. And some things that we're not quite sure if it's a health issue or not. So we'll get those issues and we will discuss them in committee and decide whether we think that bill ought to pass or be what's called inexpedient to legislate, which is like, we don't want this one. And the same thing is true in the Senate. The bills that they hear, they do the same thing in their committees. The only thing is, there's only 24 senators for the state. And so they have a much smaller group. So they have a big workload because they sit on multiple committees themselves, where I only sit on one. And we go through, we may go through 70 bills in the first, well, we start our term in January, and we end in June. But the first few months, we work on this group of bills, and then we decide, as a whole House, we meet and decide, do we agree with that committee decision? And if we do, that bill then gets ready to be moved to the Senate. And the Senate votes on their bills, and then they come over to the House. This way you end up with these two bodies hearing all of the bills that are labeled to pass. And all of the ones that aren't, they just sort of go, okay, not this time. You may have to bring them back next year or the year after.
So do you have the ability in the House to tweak Senate bills and them also, or do you all come together?
We can make amendments if we think there's a better way of doing things. And that's good, because as a committee where we have 20 people, that's 20 voices. that can review a bill that comes in and say, oh, I think if we make this adjustment here, if we do say it this way, it might be better because it would be more inclusive. Or if we say it this way, we could keep those people out of it, which is part of the challenge we have today in our when our communities are very split, is that whoever's in charge in government, whoever has the largest majority can say, okay, we want it to go this way, and the rest of us have to sit back and try and vote on things to pass or make changes, and sometimes it doesn't go through, and it gets very frustrating. On the other hand, we know that if a bill gets passed and gets put into law, that we can always talk about that later and change it, because our form of government that isn't that it's just one way. If it doesn't fit, we can make it change later. It's difficult to make the changes, but it's possible, and that's in our case. That's what we're doing currently. When we put laws in place, there are sections of law already written from years gone by that we are changing. We change the law to reflect what's happening in today's world, not back in the 1700s, 1800s, when they first started creating laws for our state and for our country. So we can make those changes to reflect our current knowledge of today, which is hopeful because we're struggling with laws and bills that are coming forward now that are painful to listen to because they're come from one side of people who may not be knowledgeable, especially in the case of transgender people.
Right, right. So you've got a little bit of skin in the game when it comes to the transgender, when it comes to trans rights,
Right.
Obviously. I appreciate, you said 2009 that you've been fighting for the community. In 2009, I was a stealth teacher in Tennessee. I was a trans woman teaching school and didn't tell a soul that I was transgender because I knew that as soon as they found out, I would lose my job. And I moved up here into education in Massachusetts, and I'm out. And lo and behold, I've had students tell me I've saved their lives just because they've met someone like them. And the fact that there are bills and laws that are going through that are specifically designed to hurt children, even if they think that those bills are actually protecting the children, they should listen to the parents and the parents' rights in this case. The parents, like, yeah, there might be some parents that say, like my parents, when I came out to them when I was 3 years old, Gerri, they did not want me to tell a soul. 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, it became obvious that my family did not want anybody to know about this, and I should be ashamed of it. Yeah. And I had to weather the storm. Had there been a place in my school where I could have at least seen someone being affirmed, it would have given me that carrot to dangle in front of me. So thank you for doing this for so long. And what I want to talk about real quick is what are some bills and laws and things that might be on the governor's desk that pertain specifically to trans people in New Hampshire?
Well, I've had a couple of good bills that I put forward. They aren't going to get to the governor's desk this time, but at least I brought them forward. And one was to make it easier for children in New Hampshire who were born in the state to be able to change their birth records to reflect their gender. Here in Massachusetts, you already have an easy law to make the changes. I was born in Massachusetts, and I got a doctor to sign a form that said that I wasn't changing, that I was identifying as a girl and should be identified as a girl on my birth certificate. In New Hampshire, it's a little more crazy. You've got to go to court, you've got to get surgeries, it's really complex. And I was trying to make it just as easy in New Hampshire as it was here in Massachusetts.
So did you collaborate with somebody in Massachusetts to kind of come up with an idea of how to write this? Or?
No.
Okay.
Well, the thing was, I had to use the form in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts to file it, and I modeled my bill after the process I went through
gotcha.
here in Massachusetts. So that was easy. If you have lived experience, you can get things done, and that's what I was trying to do. This has been the 4th time I've been submitting a bill because of the challenges where you can't get everybody to agree. And that bill has been approved by the legislature before and got to the governor's desk, but he wouldn't sign it because the last time it had non-binary people in it back 4 years ago. And now it might be a different story because a lot of states do approve.
They do indeed.
So that was one bill, and it didn't go through my committee just yet. It was retained for more work, and I can see what I can do to help do that. So that's something we'll do in the summer and fall, and I'll bring it back in the late fall, and we'll vote on it again. I had another bill that I was trying to get it so that in New Hampshire, if a family comes and with their child to want to get transgender care, both therapeutic or medical care, that we could tell the doctors they don't have to release any of that information associated with that child back to the state from where that family came from, if that family was going to be prosecuted for taking care of their child, which is happening. There are some states where a family who's taking care of their kids, it's illegal. The parents can be brought up on charges and put in jail.
It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
It's so sad. And there are bills in New Hampshire to do the same thing, and we've been able to fend them off, to say, no, you can't do that here. You've got to let the parents take care of their kids. That's the right thing to do. There are also, as mentioned, there's a parents' rights bill that has been proposed in New Hampshire. And it was, the only thing that it added to existing laws was to allow, actually not to allow, it was to tell teachers, administration in schools that they had to report a transgender or a child expressing transgender tendencies. They had to report that child to their parent. That bill didn't get passed.
Thank goodness.
That bill's been put on the table and probably we won't see it in that form. What we are seeing, though, is we're seeing bills that weren't created in New Hampshire. They were generated from other places in the country, and they've been spread around the country. And that was one of them that came to New Hampshire. There's another bill that I've been fighting that has, it just has so many terrible things in it that came to my committee. And part of it was telling parents that part of it was conversion therapy. Part of it was requiring parents to teach children more faith. And it's just, I thought there was separation of church and state, but this wanted to add faith into the education part. And it's just so frustrating to see these bills that would essentially allow government to control families and transgender kids. And it's so sad.
It really is, because like as a middle school teacher, if I had to, I'm picturing a law gets passed every time a kid tells me that they like another kid. I would have to report that to the parent. Your kid just told me they like this kid. Like, it's, how do you even, as a teacher, what I hope would happen is that teachers would just go ahead and do the right thing. Yeah. But I also know that teachers, because of capitalism and an economy, they need their jobs, so a lot of teachers are going to not follow best practices and instead are going to do harm to trans youth. And it's everywhere. As a trans athlete, as I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, they tried to ban me from the sport of disc golf, which is Frisbee? You're trying to ban me from throwing frisbees against women? Come on now. And I know that states are pushing trans exclusionary laws in sports. Is anything like that happening in New Hampshire?
That's part of one of those bills that I was talking about. They wanted to ban it. They want to ban children from crossing over in any sport. You know, trans boys or trans girls. They just say no. It's not going to happen, and it's very sad to see it. It's even in the gym classes. They don't want that to happen. It's like they're sticking their head in the sand. They said if we stick our head in the sand, it doesn't exist. So that's what I'm seeing. People are trying to make happen, and it's very sad. A bill I didn't mention was a specific bill that would make it child abuse if a parent took care of their transgender child.
Please tell me that one's tabled somewhere.
That one, yeah. It was the second
good.
time we've seen it, and it was only one representative that supported it, and it went nowhere.
So how can people tap into this in the trans community? How can they become more involved with what's happening there? Do they need to form large groups of people, or can they just call you up or email you?
They can call any representative. In New Hampshire, although I represent communities, the physical Somersworth and Rollinsford, is that I've had calls from other people in the state. People sent me emails and said, can you help me write this bill, and submit it? And I'm easygoing. I said, if it sounds like a good bill, I'll take it on, and I'll try and write a bill to help out. And that's where you can start. You can get involved with the ACLU and other organizations that are trying to help make changes. And so you can get involved with those groups. A lot of those groups will do the work of finding out which bills support different groups of people. So in fact, I'm totally dependent on some of those groups to find out which bills are in the House or the Senate that we need to be aware of. Because a lot of times the name on the bill does not necessarily tell you what's in the bill. It's a very crafty thing that people have been doing lately. So you can't just search on transgender and on the system and find it. And it makes it very difficult.
And why do you think they're being that crafty?
They're hiding. They're hiding at things because they want to get things done without people knowing. And so people don't find out until it's too late, until it's already passed and it's in law. And then it's harder to change things again. It's sort of, I'm not getting my way, so I need to hide it and get it done. It's like we see even in the federal government, we see these bills that come out and we find out there's something hidden in that bill that says that you can't do this, or it's going to eliminate something for a transgender community. And that's what happened in New Hampshire with the parental rights. There's one little piece in there that says that teachers have to report a child who's transgender to their parents. The bill itself is quite large, but in this little spot. And so it's helpful to have a group like the ACLU. Their people would do research, and they will take a bill that comes and they will go through that bill to see what's buried in those bills that's going to affect someone negatively. And so that's why we're very dependent on those organizations to do their job, which is to identify that, and it helps. They bring that information to us so that we can try and change it when it gets into our committees.
I know that recently there was a call to action for the LGBTQ community in New Hampshire because of these bills you've just been discussing. And I know friends of mine that were there. And I think that you're right. They don't want to see the masses saying, no, we want to support this community. This community should have the same rights as us. And because they don't want to support it, whether it be their whatever reason they have decided that trans people don't deserve equal rights, they came up against a brick wall recently at there was a lot of people there from what I saw. What did that feel like to know? I mean, it made me go, whew, maybe New England is safe.
Well, it's wonderful to see the support. In New Hampshire, when we walk into the Capitol building or the Legislative Office building, and there's these crowds out in front holding signs that say, you know, protect the transgender rights, protect our families. People are there sharing their voices as we walk into the building. And even in the building, they can bring those signs in the hallways. They can do that. They can't bring them into our committee rooms or even into the State House Representatives Hall, for instance. But in the hallways, they can carry their signs and they can try and corner us and have a conversation. And that's good. That's part of the legislative process. That's part where people can share their voices. And in these cases, it lets representatives know people are watching. And there's a large number. It's not just the transgender folks. It's their allies. It's their families. It's their friends. And guess what? We're voters. And that makes a big difference, because when a representative makes a vote, in many cases, if they call for a roll call vote, every person that voted for that bill is noted on the electronic form, and you can get to that through the website for the state.
Is that on all bills or just some bills?
Just the bills that we have 3 different types of voting. There's a voice vote where everyone votes.
Okay.
And depending on the volume level, the Speaker of the House can make a decision. The other one is it's called a division vote. And the division vote, we vote we have a little electronic, you can vote yes or no on this little keypad. And they'll total up the total of yeses and the total noes, but it won't record who actually did it.
Okay.
And then there's the last way where you can actually ask for a roll call vote. And so when you push a button, it actually, it tells down in the clerk's monitor, it says how many people voted and who voted one way or the other. And they record that. And that's actually is available for public viewing. So you can see who voted for or against a bill, and then make your decision when you go to vote next time on who voted for what bill.
I mean, the fact that they're trying to legislate us out of existence in places is truly baffling. Because I come from East Tennessee, Southern Baptist, evangelical upbringing, Southern Baptist grandfather, hellfire and brimstone. If they couldn't beat it out of me and scare it out of me and hellfire and damnation out of me, then there's no way a law's going to do this. It's not going to get rid of trans people. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to bet that a baby was born recently, just during this interview I've had with you, that's trans, somewhere in probably this state.
Probably many.
Probably many, right. And so if we're continuing to be born, you can't legislate us out of existence. No. But what you can do is, and what they're trying to do is, shove us back under the rocks.
Right.
Shove us back in the corners, make us afraid to be authentic. And it's a power grab, in my opinion, that people are trying to do. Let's latch on to this supposed boogeyman over here so that we can obtain power. It's happened numerous times in our lifetime, is what one group wants to have power over another. And if you have power, you can just say, I don't want to see you. I'm going to push you off to the side and put your fingers in your ears and say, I can't hear you. We have to have a loud voice. And many of us do. I'd like to think that myself, as well as a number of other people, currently I think it's 18 transgender and non-binary people have been elected to public office around the country. When I was first elected 4 years ago, there were 4 of us, and now there's 18. I want to celebrate, but I want to be sad at
Yeah,
the
I
same
know.
time.
It ought to be
both.
much larger than that.
Yes,
Yes.
So maybe it's time for the community to become more politically involved on the ground level of school boards and things like that. Then.
So I've watched. There was 4 of us to start off with. The next 2 years later, it was 9 of us. 2 years later, it was 18. There's a trend there.
It's going in the right direction. It
Going
is going in the right
Going
direction.
in the right direction. So hopefully the next time it will be 36.
And I want, yes, 36, and just keep on the doubling effect.
Doubling effect.
But Gerri, thank you for your voice, those first 4 voices that we needed in this nation, because without your voice, without Taylor Small's voice, without Danica Rome, there's so many, there's 18 of you I could list the names of right now, but
That's right.
I feel that you all kind of laid a path for us to see this is how you can become politically involved, actually become an elected representative or elected person based on the groundwork that you've laid for us, and eternally grateful for that.
Thank you.
And folks, please go out and get politically motivated. Please go fight for our community. Sitting on the sidelines right now is not a way for us to win. We need people that are willing to go out there and use their voices and use your votes for us. I used to think, Gerri, in Tennessee, that a vote was wasted time as a trans person. Like I felt like Democrats and Republicans were identical in Tennessee, and neither one of them cared about my rights. I think that I was wrong.
I think so
I think
too.
I was wrong.
The good thing is, there are some of us in office now, and if you want to know how to run for office, ask any one of us. Our names and information are out on the public networks, and we're here to help as well.
That's it. That's what we need, folks. And remember, these are kids. These are little bitty tiny children that these grown people are trying to hurt, and it's not right. But thank you, Gerri, so much for fighting the fight, and thank you for everything you do for the great state of New Hampshire.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do my best.
You do indeed. Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye.